Welcome all. This is Akhil Pandey, Assistant Professor in Sri Ram Swaroop College of Engineering and Management, Lucknow, and I am here to discuss about photogrammetric survey. In this topic, we cover basic definitions and principle of photogrammetry, important terms, important terms used in aerial survey, and what are the aerial survey and its various component. Now, talking about photogrammetric survey, basically photogrammetric is a three different words. Photo means light, grammetric means a written document, and metric means measurement. By combining all these, light, written document and measurement, we can say that it is basically a science and technology of obtaining a spatial measurement along with the other geometrical data that can be derived from photograph. So, what is spatial measurement? Basically, spatial measurement is related to the coordinate of an object in a space. Thus, we can say that photogrammetric survey or photogrammetric basically is the science and technology of obtaining spatial measurement and other geometrical data that can be derived from the photograph. What is the basic principle of photogrammetric survey? Its principle is quite similar to as a principle of plane tabling. For example, if we want a location or a point of an object in a plane table, we select two different point, known base, and by the intersection of two these different point, we can find the coordinate of this point. This principle is used in photogrammetric for obtaining the coordinate and other geometrical data. So, talking about that principle again, its principle is quite similar to as a principle of plane tabling, as we discussed that by selecting a two different point of known base length, we can find the coordinate of other different point. Now, talking about classification of photogrammetry, photogrammetric classification can be basically on two different types depending upon the lens setting and according to the position of camera. Talking about lens setting, photogrammetry can be classified as far range and close range. Far range means that a camera distance is setting to an infinite or a large distance, but in a close range the distance of camera is set to some finite values. According to the position of camera, photogrammetry can be of three different types: terrestrial photogrammetry, aerial photogrammetry and satellite photogrammetry. Satellite photogrammetry we discuss later is an remote sensing. In remote sensing, now according to the camera position again, terrestrial and aerial photogrammetry. Talking about territorial photogrammetry, photograph that are taken with a phototheodolite having camera stationed on a ground point. In this, camera is on ground. Again, second point, axis of a camera is horizontal or nearly horizontal. It means that if we are taking a photograph with a camera, its axis should be a horizontal, not in a vertical position but in a horizontal, or we can say that nearly horizontal. It means it can be either this, either this. In this type of photogrammetry, it's basically present the front view, which is also known as elevation, and this type of photogrammetry is generally used for the survey of a structure architectural or archaeological movement. Talking about aerial photogrammetry, photographs are taken from airborne vehicles such as aircraft, drone, satellite, etc. And in this type of photogrammetry, the axis of camera should be in vertical or in tilted direction. It means camera axis should be in vertical or in some tilted direction. Now talking about some important terms that is used in a aerial photogrammetry. First of all, vertical photograph. In this type of photograph, basically the camera axis, or which is also known as optical axis, is coincide with the direction of gravity. We can see this in diagram that this is an axis, camera axis. This is coincide with the direction of gravity. Again, if the optical axis coincide with the direction of gravity, we can obtain vertical photograph. Now talking about tilted photograph, if that axis is tilt or not coincide with the direction of gravity, then the photo obtained is known as tilted photograph, like this. This is somewhat tilted from the direction of gravity. And during this type of photograph, we can obtain oblique photograph. Oblique photograph are also a photograph in which the axis of camera is not vertical. Oblique photograph can be divided into two different parts, low oblique and high oblique. Talking about low oblique photograph, in a low oblique photograph, angle of tilt, that is this, must be about 30 degree. It cannot be greater than 30 degree. It must be about 30 degree. And again talking about high oblique, in this tilt angle is about 30 degree, is greater than 30 degree, but should be less than 90 degree. So if the axis is up to a range of 30 degree, it can be low oblique, and if that tilt angle is greater than 30 degree but less than 90 degree, then we obtained high oblique photograph. And there is a point that is about image of horizon. Let's discuss about what is horizon. Horizon basically can be defined as a coinciding line of sky and land, or it can be also defined as horizon. Horizon means a picture of sky. In high oblique photograph, there is a picture of sky also present in, but in low oblique photograph, as we discussed earlier, image of horizon is not included. Talking about exposure station, exposure station is defined as the first station in which, from which we can take a first photo of an object. So exposure station is defined as a space position of a front nodal point at an instant of exposure. Talking about focal length basically it is also known as principal distance, and it can be described as a distance measured from the lens center to the plane of photograph. This, it is a distance between lens center, this, and the plane of photograph, this is known as focal length. Talking about principal point can be defined as an intersection point of y and x axis in a plane of photograph. In a photograph where y axis and x axis intersect, then that point is known as principal point. Principal point generally coincide, as we discussed as we tell earlier, the principal point generally coincide with the origin of x and y axis. Talking about nadir point, a point on a ground vertically below the lens center is called nadir point. For example, looking in this figure, we can mark that this V is known as nadir point because it's just below the lens center. It's just below the lens center. A point just below the lens center is called as nadir point. Isocenter, it's an important definition. Now, this is a vertical axis, this is a tilted axis or vertical axis or a camera axis or optical axis. ठीक है, a intersection point of the bisector of this angle, intersection point of a bisector of this angle when coincide in a plane of a photograph, then that point is known as isocenter. Here we can say that this is a basically isocenter. Isocenter, again a point at which the bisector of angle of tilt intersect the photograph. Talking about swing, swing is basically an angle measured in a clockwise direction from the plane of photograph from the positive y axis to the nadir point. This is a y axis, and if we measure an angle in a clockwise direction with a positive y axis from a positive y axis to the nadir point, then this portion is known as swing. Talking about tilt, as we discussed earlier, tilt basically an angle of a camera axis or optical axis with a vertical axis. Angle between vertical axis and a axis of camera or optical axis. This angle is known as tilt. Principal line. Principal line is basically defined as a line of intersection of a principal plane and a plane of photograph. In this we can say that what is the principal line? That this is known as a basically principal line. A line intersection of a principal plane and a plane of photograph is known as principal line. Talking about optical axis, a line basically passes through the center of lens and intersect the photograph at a right angle. A line passing through the center of a lens and intersect the photographic plane at right angle is known as optical axis. What is a plumb point? Plumb point is generally a vertical axis, ठीक है, or it can be defined as a point of intersection of a vertical axis with a photographic plane. This can be defined as a plumb point, and this is also a vertical axis. Now, in aerial photography, there is a term, important term known as flying height. Talking about flying height, assume this is a datum or mean sea level, and it is a elevation of a ground, and there is a plane in which a camera is inserted. Now, defining upon flying height, we can say that it is basically a height of a camera to the ground level, not mean sea level, only to the ground level. For example, if the total height of an aircraft or a camera is h and a height of ground to the mean sea level is a small h, then flying height can be defined as capital H minus small h. So, flying height is basically a vertical distance of a lens measured above the ground level. As we discussed that flying height can also be equal to the height of camera lens above mean sea level minus the average height of terrain. Here we considered an average height because if it is h1, it is h2, then average height can be calculated as h1 plus h2 by 2. Therefore, we considered an average height in a case of ground having different elevation, or if a ground elevation is like this, then average height is equal to height. Then again flying height can be defined as h minus h in this case, and in this case h minus h average. Now, we discuss about aerial camera. So, aerial camera is basically differ from a normal camera because it is used for a aerial survey. And what are the special requirements we used in a aerial camera are, it must have a fast lens, it must have a high speed emulsion for a film. Emulsion means a property by which films or photographs is created. So, it must require a high speed emulsion, it require magazine. In order to hold a large rolls of a film, aerial camera must have a magazine, or its high speed, it should be of high speed and efficient shutter. In this we can see the diagram of an aerial camera, and by dividing it in a different part we can say that it's basically this is known as lens assembly, it's a magazine portion, and it's about body. Aerial camera can be have its into three different components: lens assembly, body, and a magazine that have some drive mechanism. Talking about parts of aerial camera, first lens assembly, this part, it consists of lens, diaphragm, shutter, and a filter. Lens used in an aerial camera must be of high performance. Aerial camera is always fixed focus type of camera. It's to be noted that aerial camera used in a aerial survey must have fixed focus type of camera. Diaphragm, it's basically this is a diaphragm situated between two lenses. It's made up of a series of leaves, and that series of leaves can be rotated as per requirement. Diaphragm is also used as an opening for increasing the shutter speed. Therefore, diaphragm opening should be large to increase the shutter speed. Talking about shutter, this portion is known as shutter. It's basically used to control the time when light is allowed to pass through the lens. It means when in aerial photography, when two different photographs are taken at a two different interval, then that interval of time when light is allowed is only through this shutter part. Generally, shutter part are of three types: focal plane type, lower type, and it's between the lens type. Thus technology is used here. Talking about filter, that is generally at the below of the camera. Filter is used for the filtration of stray light, that is blue and violet light that are present in the atmosphere. Talking about camera cone, lens assembly is supported by a camera cone. All this assembly, all these part is basically supported by this cone, and this is known as camera cone. Talking about focal plane is basically provided is at the top of the camera cone. Focal plane is always at the top of the camera cone, and that cone body must be of material having low coefficient of thermal expansion. For the proper functioning, material used for a cone, material used in a cone is of low coefficient thermal expansion. Talking about focal plane, provided above the collimation mark. Collimation mark can be defined as a intersection of two different line. Basically, if we, that is camera axis, that camera axis is also known as collimation. So focal plane must be provided above the collimation mark, and it should be provided, it should be adjusted in such a distance so that from a nodal point, so that best possible image can be obtained. Talking about magazine, exposed and unexposed film is held by magazine. This portion, it consists of exposed and unexposed film. Main function of magazine is it generally houses the film flattening device at the plane. It also controls the film flattening device which is used in an aerial camera for a proper photography. It's basically controlled by the magazine. Drive mechanism, this is generally used to supply power to the different movable part present in a camera. Camera body, what is the role of camera body? So basically camera roll body is to preserve the interior orientation. Now drive mechanism, this, it can be operated manually or automatically. It can be operated manually or automatically. Winding and tripling of shutter is done by drive mechanism. It means these are the various mechanisms that are occurring in camera, and these different mechanism is guided by a drive mechanism. It also wind the film, it helps to wind the film, and it also operate the vacuum system to flatten the film. It operate the vacuum system to flatten the film. These are the references. Thank you.